In accordance with the Openness of Local Bodies Regulations 2014, this meeting is being live streamed and may otherwise be recorded, filmed or communicated on other media platforms. The recording of this meeting will be made available on the Council's YouTube channel shortly after the meeting. Both councillors and officers in attendance are reminded to make full use of and speak clearly into the microphone available at all times. Reminder that mobile phones should be turned off or put on silent mode. Those present at the meeting should refrain from taking telephone calls. And a polite reminder to those that those members of the public in attendance must not act in a disorderly or disruptive manner or otherwise interfere with the proper conduct of its business. Apologies for absence. Sorry, Councillor Kaufman.
Yeah, can I just make it clear at this point that I have met some of the residents sitting behind in an informal street meeting where I gave them advice as a local councillor. I've come here with an open mind and want to listen to the debate.
Okay, thank you.
I think some of the people I have actually spoken to about this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Apologies for absence.
No apologies received, Chair. However, Councillor Robert Eaton is not present at the moment.
Okay, any appointments of substitutes?
None received.
None. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Kaufman has already declared his possible interest, but that's okay. No. Minutes of the previous meeting, may I sign? Okay, item number 5, report of the Development Control Manager, application number 21002112 FUL, 15 Briarmeads, Oadby. We have 3 speakers. Would you like to come forward, sir? You have 5 minutes and I'll give you a nod when you've got 1 minute left.
Thank you all for allowing us to present our case and for your time this evening. Whilst we understand that some of our neighbours have concerns over the proposed project, it is entirely possible that this stems from a lack of knowledge, perhaps a misunderstanding over what we are proposing to do. It is important that we make clear that there are so many children.
Hold on just 1 second.
Sorry, Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your voice is very quiet. I can hear, but I don't think the people sitting at the back can hear. Is it possible to have this turned up?
Is it possible to turn the microphones up?
Try and talk louder.
Could I ask you to speak a bit louder?
I'll try.
Thank you.
Do you want me to start again? Or where I was?
Start again. Yeah.
Right, okay. So thank you all for allowing us to present our case and for your time this evening. Whilst we understand that some of our neighbours have concerns over the proposed project, it is entirely possible that this stems from a lack of knowledge or perhaps a misunderstanding over what we are proposing to do. It is important that we make clear that there are so many children and young people who are in dire need of a service such as that we are proposing to do at Briarmeads. Our local authority are working with us as providers to meet a very real yet sad and unfortunate need. Our vision is to enable children with autism and learning disabilities to live the lives that they want as part of their community with the right support from the right people at the right time. That being said, it is important to note that although the home could cater for those children with ASD, we could, in theory, depending on the requirements of the council, accommodate any looked after child. A looked after child could even be a child with no additional needs or requirements, simply one that has been removed from their home through unfortunate circumstance. Through no fault or requirement of their own, they find themselves in a place where they need support and a home in which to live. Despite what may be circulating throughout the neighbourhood, this is not simply a commercial enterprise, but rather the ability to give children a chance to feel safe, secure, and thrive in a homely environment. We have another residential home for the same populace as the one that we propose at Briarmeads. To date, we have not had a single complaint from neighbours about anything from noise or ASBO tendencies, as is feared in the information provided from protesters for this project. And to note, the same misinformed concerns were raised at that point. Our clients seem to be labelled as unruly, judged as ASBOs, or just simply troublemakers, which is quite shocking as this is just not them. These are children that have not had the same start in life as their neighbours, and often they have been exposed to negative life experiences, including abuse or perhaps special needs, meaning that their families can no longer cope, or any other reason that makes children and young people vulnerable to the point of needing rescuing. There seems to be two main themes that our opposers are arguing. Firstly, and rather disappointingly, the major issue appears to be one of parking. Whilst we maintain that the staffing levels and therefore potentially cars will always be appropriate to the needs of our residents, the situation can easily be remedied by increasing the on-site car parking from 3 to 4 if judged to be absolutely necessary. This will provide more than enough allocated parking for our needs, and it should also be noted that the majority of meetings and visitations for these children will typically be off-site. This might be at school, council offices, etc. Furthermore, these children are of school age, so during term time, they will be at school, and the home would operate no differently to any typical family home with young children. Second issue appears to be one of noise and disturbance to the local peace. The proprietors of this property have lived at that address for almost 30 years, and for years there have been large residential homes, schools, local businesses, all within short walking distance, and the local population appear to have coped well with seldom an issue. We fail to understand how a small residential home can surpass and further deteriorate the local community any more than what is already present. Furthermore, any concerns over structural suitability of the home can be easily remedied by working closely with local building control officers to ensure that any perceived concerns are addressed. In short, simple adaptations and demolition of the storage shed in the garden will provide a home that's more than suitable for these children. The aim is to provide care in an environment which closely mirrors a typical family home and to ensure a degree of normalcy for these children. It is no longer appropriate to try and segregate children into larger purpose-built facilities or properties completely isolated from others. And regarding the bend in the road, which seems to be a big sticking point, that's been present for years, and the existing occupants have navigated that corner without incident. And it's safe to say that the same caution will be exercised by its new occupiers. We feel that this development will actually add to the local community, increase social interaction, and allow the community to actively engage with those in need. Lastly, I would just like to say our priority is to put children and their needs at the center of their care, give them a voice, and to help them achieve well-being through a sense of identity, value, and worth. And once again, I'd just like to thank everyone for their time and consideration in this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Vatt. Are there any questions for Mr. Vatt? Councillor Kaufman?
I'm sorry, I have difficulty in hearing. Would it be possible, Chair, for the gentleman to go a bit back on the speech on relating to car parking? It says, it's just that I'm finding great difficulty in hearing.
Yeah, so the issue with car parking is that at the moment there's 3 car parking spaces on site. And if need be, that can be changed to 4 because we've got a pebbled area, which could be tarmacked or block paving put in place. And the main issue is, I think, about visitation and people coming to the house. So a lot of that would be done off-site anyway. So these children...
It was just a bit on...
Okay, fine. Yeah.
So there's 3...
There's 3 at the moment.
I've seen 2 cars there.
Get 3 on there.
But we'll go back to that in a minute. But there's a possibility of making 4 car parking spaces and people can get out the cars as well.
I think the report from the police people was also for 3 car park spaces.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions?
Can I just ask, thank you, Chair, you mentioned you had another home of a similar description. Where is that located?
Enderby.
In Enderby.
Yes.
How long have you been running that?
Coming up to, I think the company was formed about 1.5 years ago, and this one's been registered coming up to 6 years, I think.
And how many residents are there?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No? Thank you, Mr. Vatt.
No problem. Thank you.
Desjardins, would you like to come forward? I have 5 minutes and I'll give you a nod when you've got a minute left.
Chair, is it permissible?
Absolutely fine, yes.
Thank you very much.
As long as you make sure that you speak loudly so that the microphone picks it.
Well, thank you to the panel for giving me the opportunity to present our concerns and objections to the proposed children's home for young people with challenging behaviour, aged 8 to 18 at 15 Briarmeads. My name is Caroline Desjardins and I live opposite 15 Briarmeads. And just to qualify my background, I'm a practicing registered occupational therapist with over 14 years experience working as a children's OT. And I believe that looked after children should be offered the same choices and opportunities as other children, but it needs to be in an appropriate property and location. This property has been selected on availability rather than suitability. The homeowner will be renting the property to his daughter and son-in-law, Mr. and Mrs. Batt, who own shares in Woodley Healthcare. But this semi-detached house will not accommodate the young people's needs for the following reasons. Noise. The term challenging behaviour is not used lightly in healthcare, and noise will be a significant factor. The master bedroom, back bedroom, lounge, dining room, and the proposed safe room for managing aggressive and emotional disputes or meltdown are against the adjoining wall, and the noise will travel freely between the properties. The house falls short of the NHBC standards for soundproofing. The adjoining walls are solid brick, which facilitate excellent sound transmission between properties. Strong mild steel bars are used to strengthen the walls, which again are the worst for soundproofing. The properties are built on a hill, so the joists aren't in alignment, so the sound from upstairs will resonate downstairs and vice versa. And literally, the windows are one brick apart. So as soon as the windows are open, the noise will transmit. And to be honest, for Ian and Jill Scott on the adjoining property at 17, they will be almost a prisoner and it will deprive them of their freedom to open their windows. This is not the same as living next door to a boisterous, lively family, as they will have 2 awake staff during the night to help manage behaviour and care. The staff moving around the building at night and any behavioural meltdowns will inevitably cause significant disruption to the neighbours, as it's a 24/7, 365-day-a-year service. The garden is very small and it's directly overlooked by 5 properties. The visibility of the children's behaviour will be an intrusion on children's privacy and dignity. Children need the capacity to be able to run off steam, and this space does not provide this. Neighbours will be impacted by noise and inappropriate language, which will be particularly problematic to neighbours with children. The property has been externally assessed by a learning disability OT who specialises in placing adults with challenging behaviour. And they have reported this property would not be utilised using the Leicester Assessment Framework. The house is situated on the blind bend, and young people will inevitably exit the building without permission, and if they were to go into the road, an oncoming car would not see them until the last moment. There will be 5 staff on site for handovers twice a day, with an extensive team of healthcare, educational professionals, families and friends visiting. So much additional parking around this bend will make the situation even more hazardous. We've had several near misses and 1 impact on the corner, damaging property. And this will be exacerbated by cars parked on the pavements, obscuring vision.
1 minute.
There were 10 planning application form errors, which have been signed as true and accurate. Woodley State, there'll be 3 employees, when there'll be 5 staff at handover, and at least a staff of 7 to 9 in that team to cover road leave and training. They answered no to the section if opening hours are relevant to this proposal, when the facility will be open 24/7 with awake staff throughout. There is no design and access statement demonstrating compliance with Policy 6 of the Obion Wigston Plan. The value of young people is so important, but so is the quality of life, health and well-being of the neighbours. 2 immediate neighbours have a documented history of anxiety. One has become exceptionally anxious during this period, requiring medical assistance. We do not believe this particular property is appropriate, suitable or fit for purpose for the needs of the children or the neighbours. And we ask panel that refuse this application. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you. Questions? Very much.
Thank you.
Liddell?
Sorry, Chair. Could you just rename this property as not being suitable for adult
Learning disabilities. From which perspective? From the building perspective or
building's perspective?
Dave came and he's I think you've actually already got his report in one of the letters of objection.
Thank you.
Actually, all the things.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Councillor Dar? You also have 5 minutes and I'll give you a nod when you've got 1 minute left.
Members of the committee, we do make difficult decisions on a regular basis, sometimes controversial. This particular application, Chair, is in one way, you can say children need home and it's been accepted by the residents. Children do need home. But these are not, unfortunately, not normal children. They're children with special care. And they need different kind of care. The noise, I'll concentrate on, Chair, the planning grounds, noise and traffic. Noise, as I said, the special need kids, and you can't predict them. You know, they can't help it when they're speaking what time or day or night to really can be shouting match for them, and that will be disturbing to the neighbors. You heard it from the next door neighbor what the houses are built like, so I won't go into that. So I think there's something I read in the report. There should be something that should be done to the house. I think these things should be looked at before application is granted, that they do something on the soundproofing side. As far as the traffic is concerned, I think you'll have seen the aerial photographs right in the corner. Now, again, if it's local residents, they will know how to park. But we're talking about, like you heard, there'll be health visitors, parents maybe, other kind of visitors visiting, and they will park anywhere they want. And that area, Chair, is not your residents only. It's a near school. And you can, you know, how grown-up kids, when they own cars, how they drive the cars. So they won't be sort of normal drivers. And just around the bend, either way, anything parked there, they won't see it. And accidents don't have to happen before anything is done. I mean, County Council always, obviously, always take the view or easy view out. They said, no, they can't see any problem. But when it happens, then they say, well, okay, something should be done before accidents happen, and this is likely to cause accidents here. Other issues you heard from the residents themselves. Going to that, I'll just leave it at that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dar. Any questions for Councillor Dar? No? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Ms. Hammett, would you like to your report?
Thank you, Chair. Okay. First of all, I'll outline structure of how I'm going to present. So I'm going
Speak a bit louder.
Oh, certainly. I'm going to outline the structure of my presentation. First of all, I'll outline the proposal for consideration by this committee. Then I'll take you through the site plans, the photos that I've taken of the site on my visit, wider context. Then I'll go through the consultation responses received. Then I'll do a summing up of the representation responses received also, and then I'll conclude. Okay. So first of all, to outline, the application is for a change of use from C3 dwelling to C2 children's home at Ofsted. The proposal is to provide short, medium, and long-term care for 3 children aged 8 to 18. Staffing support information provided by the applicant will be in line with children's supervision requirements and will focus on children residing in the group lived environment in order to prepare them for when they leave the care system. The applicants have indicated that there will be 2 staff members on site 24/7 who will be awake overnight, and a further staff member, a home manager, on site between the hours of 9 to 5 p.m. Obviously, we've heard a bit about handovers as well. Implementation of this proposal is, of course, dependent on the applicant winning a contract to run it as a children's home. Okay, so citing context, I'm going to need my slides. If I could have those, please, Emily. Thank you. Okay, so the application site is a two-storey semi-detached 3-bedroom house located on Briarmeads. Apologies, the site outline isn't overly great, but you can just about see it there. Oh, brilliant, zoom in. Yeah, great. So this is an established residential area which offers easy reach to a range of amenities, including shops, supermarkets, and eating close to the Rosemead Local Centre and Oadby District Centres. There are also very good schools and excellent local transport links nearby. If we go to slide 4, please. That's the next slide. Yeah, there you can see it as a Google satellite image. And as you can see, there is that bend that's already been talked about. So yeah, it is on that bend, which is close to the junction opposite with Belper Close. Okay, so if we go to slide 6, you can see the plans and the outlines. Might need to zoom in a little. If we zoom into the top of the floor plans, if we just take you through the site. On the ground floor, we've got at the front, we've got a staff office complete with ensuite, their own ensuite there. We've got kitchen and dining area at the rear, and then a communal lounge area at the front, and then to the back is the games room stroke safe space, which leads out on the patio to the rear garden, which connects to the living area. Then upstairs, if we just whiz over, the first floor, we've got 3 separate bedrooms, 1 for each resident child, and 1 bathroom with a separate WC, which is the same as existing. No changes there. So, and we can also see if we, thank you. If we zoom in, we can see the parking situation. Obviously, it's difficult to tell on just a block plan, but the representation is for 3 parking spaces. I agree, you probably could get 4 vehicles. You certainly could get 3 cars. It would be a bit tight, but the requirement in terms of highways advice is actually only for 3 cars. So it wouldn't actually be fair to stipulate a 4th parking space anyway in planning terms. There is certainly room for 3 there. So if we go on to the next slide, please. There were 2 vehicles present at the time. You can see the frontage of the house, boundaries, and there is a raised ground area. Parking might be easier if that was flattened. If we go on to the next slide, we've got got some of the rear gardens. You might have noticed on the block plan, this was referenced, I think, by the applicant and potentially by the speaker as well, the objecting speaker, Caroline. There is a large structure in the back garden that does take up an awful lot of space, and I was concerned about this in my assessment and didn't feel that there was enough room necessarily for children. So I would think that should be removed if this was to be granted. So if you whiz on to the next slide, please. There are gardens. You can also see the boundaries as well. It's showing the garden there, but it's just an ordinary garden for a family home, really. So, okay, that's the slides. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the consultations. Consulted Leicestershire County Highways, who raised no objections in regards to the parking. They simply referred the local authority to the current standing advice in regards to parking provision. Again, that's the 3 parking spaces for a home of this size and the relevant parking dimensions. They didn't mention anything about the parking in the area, and they didn't have any concerns about the impact on congestion. They didn't address it at all. Moving on to planning policy. Policy is supportive of specialist care accommodation that can be evidenced as meeting local need, and that can be integrated into an existing wider community to help create mixed and inclusive communities to meet all needs. We also consulted Leicestershire Police because, I mean, I wanted to do that because just in case there's any reason why a children's home shouldn't be located there. We hear lots about modern slavery, county lines, undesirable people in the community. So I wanted to be sure on that, but we didn't get anything of much use back in that sense. The advice was not really appropriate for a small scale change of use development, but the comments back, they were more for a large scale development. They are, however, included in the report you've been given. Okay, we did consult environmental health, mainly due to the concerns about noise, but no comments were received back. Okay, moving on to representations, objections. We had 57 letters received, 55 were marked as objections. A letter was also received from Neil O'Brien MP, which is also included as Appendix 1 and is taken as read. Okay. And so to summarise, I'm going to go through the objections received and address them. So vehicles and parking, we've obviously heard a lot about. Again, no objections raised by the Leicestershire Highways Authority, adequate parking for free, and that is the test in planning terms for a property of this size. Again, no issues regarding the location or congestion were raised. In spite of that bend, that's parking and highways. Unsociable shift hours. I understand the concerns, but there are NHS and shift workers in all communities. One staff member is leaving at 5 p.m, but I do know the concerns. Moving on to noise and behaviour of resident children. Again, obviously, it's mainly a building regulations concern. However, and again, environmental health raised no objections. And it must be noted that it was, and I'll take on board what Caroline, the speaker, said about the potential difference between children, with these kind of difficulties. But you may also get children on the autistic spectrum who may be very withdrawn. You don't necessarily know what kind of children you're going to get. So, but again, not necessarily a planning consideration. But I do sympathise there. Moving on to property and quality build. Again, I'm sorry, but not a planning consideration. That would be a building regulations issue. We also had house prices decreasing. Again, not a planning consideration, I'm afraid. Garden size, I did completely agree that as it stands, the garden would not be ideal, but I think once that structure is demolished, that would be okay, and therefore I imposed a condition, which is condition 5, to remove that structure before children were resident. Moving on to Woodley Healthcare, the company run by the applicants. Again, not a planning consideration as to whether or not they've been offsteaded as yet, or how new the company is. Other children's homes in the area was another thing that cropped up. Again, we are seeing smaller homes as opposed to larger institutions, seems to be the trend, and there is a lot written about that in the relevant legislation. That seems to be the way it's going. So you probably will see a lot more of them because they are smaller. Moving on, Councillor Dar has spoken for himself, obviously, but I think it's only fair to say he wished to express concerns about a commercial business operating in a residential area, but this proposal is akin to a family home. It's an attempt, it's been proposed as a home environment or as close to for residential children. And also from a planning perspective, as a change of use, there are no external changes to the property. It will retain a family home appearance. So those are the sort of summarised the main objections. Again, there were a lot of them, obviously. Moving on to the conclusion. Just again to reinforce the fact that condition, I'm recommending approval of this. Condition has been placed that the property holds no more than 3 children, and that the home must be used for no other purpose than a children's home, should it be passed. The structure must also be removed in order to provide adequate amenity space for the health and well-being of the resident children. So in conclusion, this change of use proposed to C2 Children's Home would not generate significant additional traffic in the area, nor impact amenity with a maximum of 3 children residing at any given time, equivalent to existing homes within the area. And I realise, there's been very difficult, heartfelt arguments on both sides, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. But taking all of this into account, officers conclude that there is insufficient evidence to warrant refusal of the application. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sennett.
Thank you.
In order to make sure we do these proceedings correctly, as Mr. O'Brien has specifically asked for his letter to be read out, are we happy that we have read this?
Chair, in my paper, seem to have got a copy of the
Appendix 1, just before the pictures.
now.
Can I give you a couple of minutes to read that? I just need to make sure that his comments have been looked at. You with that? Councillor Broadley?
Is correct when you say that this is becoming more and more often, that this is the way the system is going. We all know that we had Little Hill House at the bottom of Bushlow End, down the bottom there. And it did cause problems. It was a big home, and it was it was a girls' home, and it did cause a lot of problems. There does seem to be a glut of these applications coming forward. And And we can expect this because the bigger homes are closing down. The children have got to go somewhere. But a couple of questions. It was stated by, I think, the applicant, he started off with learning disabilities. And then he went on to say about it was to prepare children for leaving the care system. People with learning disabilities don't leave the care system. They remain. Their learning disability is for life. It's not something that they get over. If we're talking about challenging behaviour, yes, that can sometimes be rectified. So I'd like to know whether it's actually for challenging behaviour and to use the term normal children, because they're all normal children, that will leave the care system at some point, because I can't see it being a mixture. You wouldn't be able to have a mixture of learning disabilities and challenging behaviour, although some people with learning disabilities do have challenging behaviour, I accept that. But I'm trying to get at who will be the service users? Is it going to be somebody with a learning disability? Is it going to be a child that has come into care? Because you can't have a mixture of the two. So I find that a bit strange that we've not been given exactly who. The other thing is, am I right in that should this application be approved, that this isn't the final stage that the applicant has to go through, that they then have to get a licence to be able to carry out this service? If that is the case, which I think it is, if as stated, the building isn't suitable, then a licence wouldn't be given anyway. And the county council who place these children wouldn't use the service. So although I certainly have sympathy, I think we can use the building as a reason for refusal, because it wouldn't carry on anyway. They would have to get that. They would have to get that licence. Could you answer about the learning disability and the?
We'll allow Mr. Gill to answer that.
Yeah, please.
If I could just answer on the point that Councillor Broadley has just made with regard to the next steps in the process. She's quite right, albeit that this committee might decide to grant planning permission. In the event that the applicant then does not receive registration through Ofsted, then that planning permission will not be capable of being implemented. And therefore we'll be in a position where we have a property that has a C2 use as a children's home, and then they would have to reapply to turn it back into a dwelling house because they'd need to go down to a C3. I'm not able to answer the question directly, Chair, with respect to the users. That would be down to the applicant and what his intentions are.
Any comments, Mr. Denman?
No, I've heard with my to the building, but yeah, that would be a question for the applicant, Chair.
Okay, can I come back just a minute? To both sides, and like the officer, I can see both sides of the argument, if you like. What I'm having difficulty is planning reasons to refuse this application. And so therefore, I don't see how we would have anywhere to go with it. The only thing that if the people who don't approve of it, they've got hope in the fact that they might not get a licence because of the building. So I would propose approval.
Thank you, Councillor. Could I also put in that if there are any noise nuisances or other things like that, there are other statutory bodies that can deal with such things? Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for a very clear report.
Oh, very welcome, thank you.
I just want to make before I start my other bit, I just want to make the comment on page 15 where you say no councillor representation. I have to say, got here this evening, meeting here this evening, because of not the right word, of Councillor Duff. Councillors, and we thought it was very important that members have an opportunity, and it's not, and we had difficulty persuading people that we needed to come here, and it's right that we're here, and I everybody for coming out for this one item, but it's not quite correct to say that no councillor.
Oh,
We were pushing and told we couldn't have it, but we've got it. But anyway, that's it. Getting on to this planning application. It wasn't so many years ago that if you wanted to open up a children's home with free changer, a house, A1 used to C1 or whatever it was, you were allowed to do it. In fact, down the road that I live in, the end house changed from a residential, ordinary home to a residential home. And there wasn't even a need in those days for a change in planning use. But from reading this report here, and particularly the comments of what the police decide that you need to put in if you have a children's home, lampposts, 24-hour lighting from what I can see with lampposts of given height. And I know we were warned, but when residents read there and all the other stuff in your report, there's a big difference. And it's now accepted generally that there is a big difference between a children's home and a normal residential home. We've gone full circle, and I've argued the other way as well. But children should be living in small, 2, 3, 4 children, in which homes can't point them out from the big children's home up the road. I think this policy is right, and most of the people I've spoken to also think this policy is right. I think my concern is what you've put in the report on page means of dealing with seeming to say, unless you can answer me, we're being asked to give a planning consent for something which may be able to be put right under building regs. And my only complaint is, I think it is inappropriate to have a semi-detached house joining a property that's going to have waking staff 24 hours a day, changeovers with 5 staff, and it is not or neighbours. We all know that, and sometimes if you're lucky, you get good next door neighbours, and if you're unlucky, you get dodgy next door neighbours. So I accept that. But if this were to be a detached property, I wouldn't be sitting here this evening. My complaint is that this property is not suitable. And it's this property alone that I'm arguing about. This is what Mr. Neil O'Brien has put in his letter. I don't often agree with him. I'm paid not to agree with him. But it's the wrong property. And during the applicant's presentation, we spoke about getting 4 cars on that drive. Well, first of all, you've got to have alterations to get 3 cars off. It says that bit in the front has got to be changed. And my guess is if you put 4 cars on there, you're going to have to get out through the sunroof, because I don't think you'll be able to open the doors wide enough. And it is on a bend. You've admitted it's on a bend, but it have a highway authority, because they would have said something, and we can't do anything about that. So my only ground, and it's an important ground, is that this is the wrong house because of its design, style and type, and not even in the wrong place. I wouldn't even know if that had been a detached one, I'd have no problems, but I would not like to live on the other half of that semi-detached property. I don't think anybody should be expected to do that. And I don't believe that we should be asked to be given planning consent tonight because of what we're promised could be adapted through building reg. And I just think it's the wrong property.
Gill, would you like to come back on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think we've already made, or it's already been made clear throughout the presentation that the matters that you're complaining about the suitability of the property, namely the soundproofing and the construction, are not material planning considerations. And that is the bottom line. The fact of the matter is that this property has an application. The application meets the policy requirements. And as Councillor Broadley was quite right earlier, there is nowhere to go, in my opinion, in terms of refusing this application. The impact would be no different if tomorrow a family with 4 children could move into the property and you could have as much noise as this property, as this use may actually create. And as has also been made clear, the fact that we are granting, or that you may grant permission for the property does not mean to say that the use that has been applied for will ever take place, because this is the first step in a series of steps to be taken. And if the applicant cannot convince Ofsted and the appropriate bodies and the commissioning group at county to use that property, it will not be used as a children's home.
If I may, Chair.
Councillor Kaufman?
I am not qualified to argue as to what facilities are needed for the children. The licensing authority, whatever they are, licensing as whether the facilities are appropriate for the children. I'm saying, as a member of this planning committee, that is asking for a change of use for a property, that this is the wrong one. If a family with children move in, okay, but you're not going to have 2 more people awake all night and when changeovers at odd times of shifts. That's the difference. And that's why I feel that when the law was changed to ensure that people got a change of use, that was the type of thing that was in mind. Because if it is as Mr. Gill has said, if it is, could be equivalent of a family with 4 kids in, okay, but it's not. And that's why the people have had to come here for a change of use.
Can I just make a point of clarification, Councillor Kaufman? The reason why we're here for a change of use is because the courts have said that where the people are not permanent carers, then it is not a dwelling. If that property was to open up tomorrow as a children's home, or a home where you had permanent carers,
if it was a foster home,
yes, then you would not need a change of use. And the only reason it needs a change of use is because where the carers change, the shift changes, but the carers change, there's a rotation of carers, then the courts have determined that that does not form a family unit, a group of people living together. But if they were to operate it with the same people permanently on site, it would not require a change of use. So there's a very sort of different, you see the point I'm trying to make?
big difference.
Yeah. Okay, I think we all understand your point, Councillor Kaufman.
Difference because
We all understand Mr. Gill's point, but
yeah, I mean,
we're going backwards and forwards now. So can we move on, please?
and the other reason that I think somebody mentioned the growth in small children's homes in the local area. From my research, it is because in the southeast, property is very expensive. And if you wanted to go into the children's home business, you would open a children's home here because the local authorities, the London authorities, those in the southeast,
Councillor Kaufman, I don't like to stop you, but you are going way out of the red line.
well, I was explaining.
This has got nothing to do with this
Okay.
application. So can we move on? Councillor Lloydell?
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, can I say that the hearing system in this room is, I don't think it's up to standard.
Agree with you.
And needs to be looked at. I've had a great deal of difficulty with this report. When I read it, I was conflicted between the caring of children and the planning. And I've had to really focus hard on what is planning in this and what goes against my feelings with children being cared for in the system. I'm all for children being cared for in small groups, which are suitable for their age range and their abilities. Then I had to try and push all that to one side and just look at the planning situation here, which again then broke down into planning and what a planning officer will tell me can be dealt with through other council services. So I then came back to this application and I have a question, page 14 and 15. Policy 6 of the local plan, and that this application does not meet that planning policy. So I would like a comment, please, on that, because it goes on to say, because it doesn't meet that planning policy, the application should be refused. So I'd like a comment, please, on that. It then says underneath that it's in Plan Policy 11. So I'd like a comment, please, on that. And if those two planning policies are not being met, why are we allowing this application to go through? I would like answering, please, is the parking issue. We have been told quite clearly, and once again, highways are not giving us any support on this, that there is adequate room for 3, possibly 4 car parking spaces on that front. Now, as I look at that picture photograph, there's a 4x4 there that belongs to. What happens if there are 3 people with 4x4s? Because there's no way, well, they could get the cars on there, but they'd never get out of the door, out of the cars at all, because that space just is not wide enough. And therefore, it is going to encourage parking on the highway, possibly on the footpath path, on a bend, which is a planning consideration, and highways aren't supporting it. But we know, being local councillors, that that is going to be a serious issue. It's also going to be a very serious issue for the residents around there. So I'd like that, please, clearing. And I know you'll tell me that we've got no evidence or no support from highways, so we can't go for a refusal on that. I think highways have let us down once again on that situation. My final comment is on the actual plan. If we could go to the plan, please, the proposal of the ground floor. Games room at the back. Now, you're going to tell me that noise is not going to be a planning issue and it can be controlled by environmental health, but we need to get this sorted now. Room. Those children may sit there on laptops and iPads and whatever silently all day long, but I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to have games in there, whatever. We need to make sure that that room, which is adjoining next door neighbour, is the soundproofing sufficiently covered to enable a quality of life for the residents next door. Because if they are going to lose a quality of life, that is a planning issue. And we should be dealing with it here and now in this room. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. First of all, in regards to the design and access, we generally only require those on major applications, of which this isn't really classed as one, being only a very small change of use. So we did ask for a statement, which doesn't really class as a design and access statement, but a statement about what was intended. But no, we wouldn't require a full design and access statement for what is essentially a small change of use where there's no material changes to the building. It's not a proper development. It's just a change of use. So we wouldn't require that. In regards to your next question, which is the parking.
Sorry.
Policy 11.
Policy 11.
Oh, sorry. Policy 11.
About sleeping accommodation required.
Oh, apologies.
To facilitate the staff.
Oh, sorry. Is that, I do apologise.
The question was that on page 15,
Yeah.
it says that the local plan policy 11 is being conflicted by this application and talks about accommodation, sleeping accommodation for staff. We can see from the design that there is shower facilities. I would assume from that they are going to be sleeping overnight. That may be an assumption I shouldn't make. It would seem a reasonable, but there are no sleeping accommodation for staff.
Ah, right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, the information. The information provided is that staff will not sleep overnight. As such, Complex 11.
If I can just
I'm going to refer
explain.
to my colleague Jasper.
What the information the applicant has provided, the staff won't be sleeping on site. The office for the staff is away from the adjoining house, and when they are there overnight or for a long shift, if they wanted to freshen up or whatever, there is a shower available. It doesn't mean that they will be sleeping in terms of their employment or their duty. They should.
Chair, through you, Chair. So through those two policies then, the first policy 6, it is not required. And through policy 11, because they're not sleeping overnight, that is not in conflict. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
The question was regarding the free cars and if it's not possible to actually get free cars on there.
Okay, thank you. Yes, in regards to that, we can only really go, we have standard advice from the Leicestershire Highways Authority, which stipulates that parking spaces must be 2.4 metres by 5 metres, and that a house of this size is 3 spaces. That's 3 lots of that, which this site meets that requirement. We can't arbitrarily start adding meters on in case there are 3 4x4s. We wouldn't be able to do that.
Okay, then
I hope that answers.
the fourth statement was regarding the games room and soundproofing. Is that something that could be conditioned? I know it's mentioned in that we need to look at building regulations, but is it something that could actually be?
I think Jasper
conditioned?
Yeah, if we go to this drawing and you can see the red line, the red line denotes a clearly with the games room, it's not a shared boundary, it's standalone. So it's the noise transfer won't be. Oh. Other agencies and authorities suitability of the house. So in terms of after that.
Would that have to happen? I think what Councillor Lloydell is concerned about is, would that have to happen before permission was granted by another body?
Yes, it would, but there's, I think I'd have to defer.
Gil?
There's no reason why.
View is actually that to try and put it as a condition, I'm not sure that it's actually got a justifiable planning reason to put it. So I don't think that if you try to put soundproofing as a condition, it's justifiable in planning terms. Because the property is already built, the property is there. And I know we keep going back to other avenues and other measures, but the reality of it is that there is a regime for ensuring people can live quietly, and that's the Environmental Protection Act. And I would be uncomfortable if a member tried to put a condition on in respect of putting soundproofing. We don't ask for soundproofing in other properties. I mean, it's an existing property. It goes back to the point about policy 6. Why wasn't there a design and access? Well, it's already there. Normally, you get a design and access statement when it's a new build, when you want to see what they're proposing. Here, we know exactly what's being proposed because you can look at it and we've seen it on the pictures. So again, and I hate to keep repeating it, my caution is that trying to condition this with soundproofing is not a planning reason. And, you know, we leave it to the other arms of the authority to deal with it if there is an issue.
So, Chair, thank you, Mr. Gill. I understand that. It doesn't, I don't think that would put the residents' mind at ease at all. But thank you very much. I therefore ask, Chair, would it be possible to look at a temporary permission? Am I being unreasonable in asking for a temporary permission? Because if we give them a year, 2-year temporary permission, and there are issues which arise over that time, then this planning, we could withdraw that permission. Am I being unreasonable, Mr. Gill?
Gill?
Councillor Lloydell, you're never unreasonable.
Thank you.
But the position is, so far as a temporary permission is concerned, they are frowned upon unless there are specific reasons. So generally, a temporary permission would occur, for instance, where you have a landowner who has crops, arable crops. He requires migrant workers to pick them, and he would get a temporary permission to site caravans on his site. There's, in my view, there is no good reason here why you would want to go for a temporary permission. If permission is granted and then the offset license is granted and there is an issue, there will be various options of dealing with it. One through the EPA, as I've said. But the other point is, if there are problems, as is being suggested, then I would suspect that the first thing that would happen is Ofsted or any responsible local authority that has placed a child there would immediately remove them. You know, so again, sorry to disappoint. My advice is a temporary permission wouldn't wash in this case.
Okay. Councillor Joshi?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I, like Councillor Lloydell, I'm torn between the development and the vulnerable side. Initially, the children, yes, they do better in smaller groups, and I am all for that rather than bigger institutions. But the sort of children that the applicants mentioned were autistic, ASBs and ADHDs, that sort of long-term conditions. My concern really is on safeguarding issues within the actual house, the build itself. I personally don't think there's enough room there for three children to be playing in the garden and neighbours looking over them. There's a big safeguarding issue in my perspective, I think, because these are vulnerable children. The schools in the area, the children are going to be passing the house as well. And there's two big schools, Beecham and Gartree there, which is again a health hazard, full stop, with traffic, as well as the children interacting with these vulnerable kids. The other issue that I had was the bathroom. There's only one bathroom and one toilet upstairs. So does that mean they're gender neutral? And if they are gender neutral, what does that mean for the children there?
I think that's a concern for Ofsted rather than this planning.
I understand.
We wouldn't in any way be involved in the placement of children or their safeguarding. We have to look at the application as it is.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. That
I
it's
think you're
from a building.
a little bit out of the red line that this committee could even think about.
I understand that.
I understand your concerns, but it's not really for this planning committee. Those sort of questions.
Yeah, my issue was the garden. I don't think is big enough for that many children. But again, that may not be at the planning.
All I could say on that is I had 3 children, a similar sized garden, and it was quite adequate.
Yeah, but we're talking about compromised children here.
Don't know who my children are.
No, I don't, and I can't say that.
Okay, Councillor Joshua.
Okay.
We move on. Councillor Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Difficult application. I think what people have said, I mean, I've been on the committee for many years, Mrs. Lloyd, so she's stole most of my thunder to start with. But we've got to look at this on purely planning grounds, not emotional grounds. And as Mr. Gill has said, there's other people looking at other aspects of this application. We're merely looking at this as a plan application. What Ofsted do and what the county council do is a different matter. Now, we come back to parking and traffic. Now, Mr. O'Brien's letter concentrates basically on parking and traffic. It's not a problem. And they're the highway authority. So who are we to argue? We may have local knowledge in a court of law that bears no weight. They'll go straight to the officials, which is the county council, and they say it's not a problem. If it's put into the equation, we're lost before we start on that. On parking, highways, because it's on a bend, county looked at it and says it's not a problem. So we're stuck there. It's been explained about policy 6 and policy 11, which I also underlined. Mrs. Lloyd was brought that bit out. What I'd like to do is answer this one. The semi-detached house has been used for this purpose. This gives us a problem. However, stipulated in future has to be a detached property. Write it into a local plan, or can we write it into something that, you know, in future there must be a detached property rather than a semi-detached?
We could look at that, Councillor Bolter, but again,
It's not
really part of
it's just
planning
this
application.
application is the first one I think we've had that's been a semi-detached property. So, you know, let's think about this. It won't help with this case, but it might help with future case.
It's certainly something that could be looked at. We are in the process of reviewing the local plan. Ultimately, it will be a matter for a planning inspector to determine whether they're happy with our local plan. But we certainly wouldn't dismiss it. But it's not going to help tonight, I'm afraid, as you appreciate.
When I say I looked all this very carefully, and I make sympathy with the residents, don't get me wrong, but I can't find a planning reason to refuse this application. Good.
but I can't. And I've been on this committee for many years. I can't usually get stuck for find the planning reasons, but it's not, I'm beat. I can't find one. If Highways has supported us, yes, we've got some reasons, but Highways not supporting us. So I can't find a reason to refuse it.
Okay. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. I'm all for the rehousing of young people into an environment as close as possible to a normal living household, as we would put, without it being fostering. And therefore, I'm not against this, and I take on board everybody's concerns. One thing I wanted to pick up on was what Councillor Lloyd said regarding temporary permission, because it's an interesting one for me, because this is a business, and therefore is similar, although not the same, to an industrial estate and a dancing studio going in, a snooker hall going in, a gymnasium or martial arts or something like that, which have had temporary permissions, as you clearly know, Chair, for a numerous years and years and years. So perhaps there is somewhere to go on what Councillor Lloyd suggested with a temporary permission, because if we can do it for one set, like a gymnasium going into an industrial estate, then can't we do it here? And if we can do it here, wouldn't it help to alleviate the residents that they know that if there is any problems over a year or 2 years, like Councillor said, then there is going to be some time where it comes back. And therefore, if there is, we can look at it then. And if there isn't, then the residents should be happy with what they've got, and there's no need for them because they've got that. And therefore, it's a bit of a balance to both sides of the argument. And hopefully it allows the applicant to get on with their business, and they know that in a year, 2 years, or whatever the committee decided, they know that then they've got to adhere to this, because if it doesn't, they're not going to get permission, and it will be rescinded after a year or 2 years. And the residents know that if they do step out of line and there is noise problems and they report it to environmental health and they go down, again, is going to be looked at in 2 years' time again. So there is a resolution to the problem in that matter of time. So I think we should look at that again. I'm sure Mr. Gill will tell me opposite, but I can only see the fact that we do it for others. Why can't we do it here?
I believe one of the last times we did discuss this, it was deemed inappropriate because it's detrimental to the business plan of the applicant.
And I think that
it would also, on appeal, be completely thrown out because of that, with costs against this council.
Absolutely, Chair, but
not classed as reasonable.
Could the same not have been said about all the other times we've done dance studios, martial arts, snooker?
Yes,
we did rescind that last time, I believe.
So,
Gill?
Yeah, I mean, the position is, I think members will be well aware that from the previous occasions that my view on temporary permissions was that it shouldn't have been granted, but that's by the by. The position is that it's different because what you were looking at then was the use. You had a B1 use, which was light industrial, and you were allowing it to be used for dance and other things. And one of the reasons that was done, the rationale behind that was because it was impossible to let those buildings for the B1 industrial use. And therefore they were standing empty and the landlords were encouraging the dance studios and everything else to come in. That's not the same here. We have a situation here where, in my view, it would be detrimental to try and do a temporary permission. I can't see any planning reason why you would give a temporary permission. The business as proposed will stand and fall on its own, because it will fall if it doesn't get the approval from Ofsted. It will fall if it doesn't get placements from the authorities. And it's as simple as that. And I don't see that giving, because the other problem that you've got is if you give a temporary permission for 2 years and at 18 months, the applicant looks to enter into a contract with an authority to take children, they're going to take one look at it and say, you've only got 6 months permission left. And that, so as the chair said, the business model then suddenly goes out the window, because no authority is going to run the risk of putting clients in there if there's the potential for the permission to disappear. And I'm afraid, I appreciate member sentiment, but I think we're now at a position where it's all or nothing. You either grant the permission or you refuse it and take the consequences of the other way. But that's entirely a matter. I've said, in my opinion, there's no grounds no planning grounds for refusing it, but it's a matter for members.
Morris?
Thank you, Chair. I completely agree. And that's something I've argued regarding temporary permission for many, many years. So it's nice to hear you say that. With that in mind, Chair, I would move permit.
Yeah.
I'll second it, sorry.
Yeah.
If I can add, just basically add the points that Mr. Gill's just made. I've certainly got experience with these children's homes. And basically, in terms of County Council, the awarding authority, they won't entertain an application with a temporary permission. Basically, you'll just kill off.
Should never do temporary, ever.
I understand the point about temporary and let's see, but you know, there are issues about for them to enable them to get. Were, you know, then say you had, say hypothetically, and you would have children, oh, by the way, you've got to go after 2 years and when your home, then you've got to move them out. So it is a bit down studios and that's so it is all or nothing.
Right, we've got one more speaker and then we'll move to Councillor Kaufman.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question if it could be explained to us. Chair, did Mr. Gill, and I'm sure Mr. Gill through you will answer, imply or say that as a planning committee, we can never turn down a planning application because the building is unsuitable? That's not a planning ground that we can turn down. Because that's my understanding, because the argument that I put, the building is unsuitable.
But the building is a dwelling house. The building will be a dwelling house after, or if you grant permission, albeit that it'll be used in a slightly different way. If there was an application to set up a microbrewery or something else in that building, then yes, that building could be considered unsuitable, such that the planning committee could refuse it. But I think we're looking at such a subtle difference. It was a house, and it still will be a house. It's just that the way that it operates is slightly different. You know, you made the point earlier about the fact that you can't choose your neighbours. You know, there may be a nice neighbours in there today, you know, a couple have been there 30 or whatever, and tomorrow they sell it and you could have the family from hell. And no, but it's still a house. It's just the different usage.
It's a different
Okay.
planning.
Yeah, can we move on now? I think we're at the end of this debate, so we'll move to the vote. So it's been moved by Councillor Broadley to permit, seconded by Councillor Morris to permit. All those in favour of permit, please keep your hands up. All those against? Any abstentions? No, the application is permitted. That is the end of the business for today. So thank you for your attendance and good evening.